Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's once again Thursday, 7 p.m., your favorite time of the week because it's Keepin It Rio time. And for the last 232 episodes, I've brought you absolute fun, enjoyment. I've taught people things. I've had some amazing guests. And today is definitely going to be no different. I am excited. We just met about a minute and a half ago. So, longtime friends. And I think we're going to have ourselves a great conversation today because we've already found that we've got things in common. And I think that's the best part about this. So without any hesitation whatsoever, folks, let me welcome tonight's guest, Grace Redman, to the show. Grace, welcome to Keepin It Rio. How are you doing?
I'm great, Chuck. Thank you for having me on Keepin It Rio. I love that.
Yeah, and it's named after my Rio Blanco roofing. Yeah. So kind of corny, but at the same time, I think it's pretty cool. So
I love it.
That's all that really matters. If you agree with me, then we're right. And that's all that counts. So
I'm down for the cause.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Grace. Where are you coming at us from tonight? Or today? I guess it's probably a different time where you're at than it is where I'm at. It's dark
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's, early evening for us. And I'm Grace Redman. And I am the owner of Stansbury Staffing and Dare to Achieve. I've been the owner for the last 26 years. And at Stansbury, what we've done is we help clients, staff, talent for their businesses, anything from the mom pop shop like yourself to Fortune 500 companies. And then the coaching side of the business, which is Dare to Achieve, is where we work with high performers to help them elevate to the next level of success. Because typically what got them here isn't going to get them to the next level. And so it's just been an amazing ride. But I think most importantly, I'm a mom and a wife, a sister, a friend. That's for me the most important, piece of my life.
Absolutely. Business is business, but life is just a cool thing. And the more people you can have around you that you love to be around and that you can impact and make, see things improve in their lives as part of what you do, it's worth it. So I love to hear about this. Tell me a little bit more about your coaching side. I'm very interested in this. I have a business coach myself, and we've had coaches for many years. I actually sometimes go out and do coaching and sales training for roofing companies around the country, and I'm a mentor to several. So I think we've got some pretty good common ground that we can cover here. But tell me a little bit about what's going on your end. 26 years.
26 years.
How do you get started in such a thing?
So I started the staffing business 26 years ago and the coaching business 10 years ago. And I got started in the staff. It's so funny. I just shared this story. I got started in the staffing business. It was a bit of a selfish reason. It was because I wanted to be financially independent. I didn't want to have to depend on anyone. And I was in this bar here in Palo Alto, and I overheard two gentlemen talking about how their sister just made $10,000 from finding somebody a job. And I said, oh my gosh, if I can do that, I could take care of myself. I don't have to depend on anyone. So that was the selfish reason. Once I did get in the industry, I loved it because I'm naturally a nurturing, giving person. And so just helping candidates find the right employment fit and helping clients find the right talent, it was just a perfect blend for me, like to help others. And I also got to, contribute to my family and find, just financial security.
I love it. And I think there's nothing selfish about wanting to have financial independence and to be able to take care of yourself. That's why we all do it. I don't do roofing because I love roofing, although I do love it. It's a good way to pay the bills, And I think that's the most noble cause of them all, being able to go out and take care of people and not have to rely on others to support you it's awesome. So congratulations on that. And
thank you.
We talk a little bit about how you are helping folks from all different walks of life, all different size companies. Tell me a little bit about how you go about choosing the people that are good fit for you to work with that you can help. I'm sure there are probably some that you've turned down over the years. And what's your ideal client look like? What's the type of company, the type of people that you like to help specifically?
I think for me, it's about alignment and it's about an energy. And I like to work with people who have the same values that are, on the staffing side. I would always tell my candidates, like, I'm not going to send you to a company that I wouldn't work for myself. And same, I wouldn't send, a client, a candidate that I wouldn't, have work for me. So it's really, for me, it's about working with good people. And even on the coaching side, it's about working with people that are in alignment. And, you've had coaches, I've had coaches, someone who's coachable, who has an open mind, who's open to make, changes, who can take accountability for where they're at and they want to move forward. So really, when I choose the people that I want to work with on both sides of my business, is that, do they have the same values that I do? And I think one big piece is, are they a good person? Are they kind? How do they treat others around them? I kind of see, how did they treat my, staffing coordinator? How did they treat my scheduler? And then I know, I'm like, okay, this is a good person. That's important to me.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. I think being able to work with people that you believe in, that you realize actually do want your help and are actually going to put in the work. They're not just going to say, Grace, I paid you a bunch of money and I didn't get any results. No, I didn't do anything, but that's your fault. I see a lot of those in the world that we live in. What do you look for when you're seeking out someone that's, maybe right at that point where they feel like they need to take that next step and they need to understand what they need to do to improve, but they're not quite capable of doing it on their own? How do folks seek you out? And then how do you go about with, designing the plan that you can put together to help them improve?
Yeah. I mean, typically I attract my clients through speaking engagements, or, they know me from the staffing world. They've already developed a relationship with me. They trust. I'm very committed to our community. So I go to a lot of networking events. So typically the people that I'm attracting are already those high performers who've already established some type of success. Typically they're overachievers, high performers, and they get to a point where the way they created their success to this point is no longer working. And so they want to get from here to there, but they have to do something very different. And what we do is kind of get to the point where, okay, what are the stories you're telling yourself? Because typically the stories they're telling themselves help them create the success to get here. But then they have the success, but they don't have the fulfillment. They don't feel fulfilled. They feel like something's missing. They're spread too thin. Their relationships are falling apart. And so what we do is really help them. What I do is help them kind of get that full circle success where they feel as good within themselves as they look on paper.
I like that. And, it is a very complex scenario when you're a business owner of any size, anybody, no matter if you're a one person operation or you've got thousands of people, it's the most important thing to you. And it's something that you're building. And I think to be able to seek that guidance and to look for someone that you can confide in and you can trust and say, hey, you know what? I need you to tell me where I'm going wrong or what I'm not doing to get to that next level. Here's what I've done to get there. I know that takes a lot of honesty and it takes a lot of sometimes brutal truth. And that's been one thing that I've always enjoyed, is when someone tells me exactly how it is. This is what you're doing wrong. This is where you're doing well, but you could do much better here. So tell me a little bit about how you put these together and some of the techniques that you use to take high achievers from point A to the next level when they've already achieved some success.
That's a great question. So I have a methodology called the SOAR method. And, number one, we want to see, where are you currently? One, and where are the gaps? And then typically when we have gaps, it's we got to take accountability. So own that part, like own the mess, own the gap. And then once we recognize what the gap is, then we start to take action to do things differently. And then once we take that action, then you start seeing the results, and then you stay committed and consistent to that. So really, like you said earlier, like you have to be honest. Yes, I got to this place. Okay, now let's gain clarity and see where's the gap and take ownership of that. And then what's the action that we can do different? Because like I said, what got you here isn't going to get you from here to there, especially if we're scaling and ready to elevate. Really what's underneath it are the stories. And so what we don't realize that our limiting beliefs got us here, but our limiting beliefs now are sabotaging us. So we got to really rewrite the stories that we're telling ourselves to scale and get to that next level.
Yes, I love that. And it's so true. There are some very hard conversations that need to be had there. I know that a lot of times when people are excelling to a point where they are considered to be high achievers or their businesses are successful in the eyes of the general public, that sometimes it can get a little complicated when you sit down and say, hey, look, here's what's wrong with you and here's what you need to do differently. Do you have any experiences where you've had pushback from people? Maybe they've told you, well, what do you really know? I've gotten to this point. Tell me a little bit about some of that you've encountered along the way, because I know how people work, entrepreneurs especially.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't like to be told that we're not the smartest people in the world and that we're not awesome and that we've got gaps that we need to fill. So what are some of the scenarios that you've had to experience throughout your career where you've maybe run up against someone that said, well, you know what, Grace, I think you know a little bit about what you're talking about, but I think I know more. And how do you handle those kind of scenarios with potential clients or even existing clients when you take them to a certain level where they may all of a sudden have that false sense of confidence again?
Right. Well, usually the question is, how's that working out for you? How's it working out? And typically what I find is that it's and I've experienced this, it needs an identity shift, because again, like those limiting beliefs got us here and they're tied to our identity. And I work with a lot of people on the hustle and grind, where we want to debunk that myth. And they think, well, if I'm not hustling and grinding, then I'm not going to be motivated. And I said, it's an identity shift. And they're afraid to let that go because they're afraid if they're not tied to the identity of the hustle and grind, that they're going to lose their motivation and their businesses are going to fail, which is not true. And so I always ask them, is there a better way to do this? Can we create a better way to do this? And typically they say yes. I said, okay, it's going to start with an identity shift, which is it's not easy, but it's very possible. And it feels so much better when you're creating from a place of faith as opposed to a place of fear. Because I don't know about you, Chuck, but for myself, I created my success from a place of fear initially. Like I was afraid I was going to fail. I was afraid I was going to be broke. I was afraid I wasn't going to make it. That's what motivated me. Now I create from a place of faith.
Yep. I love that. And I see that so much in my industry. And I think this is why our conversation is going to be so valuable to the audience. Is I know a lot of people that are in the roofing world, and believe me, there are many different levels. I've got people that are brand new. I've got people that have been doing this for 35, 40 years. I know people that do, $500,000 all the way up to $100 million a year in business. And the one thing that everybody has in common is when we get started, it's exactly what you just said. Number one, it's not going to run if I don't do it, because I'm the main cog. And if I'm not doing every single thing, it's not going to happen. And then what happens is you get burned out, you get stagnant, your company starts to, wear you out to the point where you no longer enjoy it. You actually start to hate it. And I've been there. I know that feeling quite well. And then it's like you have that moment of clarity that someone can say, hey, look, here's what you need to do. You need to delegate. You need to, give some of the other responsibilities to other people. You need to expand your team. You need to, just whatever it is you need to do. You need to change the way you're doing it, because you're not going to survive. And I think that the most beautiful thing is when people recognize that and then they actually apply it, and then it starts to blossom into something much larger than they ever anticipated. That, that's where you probably get your true joy out of what you do, I would assume, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, witnessing my clients achieve that next level success, but not just professionally, personally, that's really what I'm focused on. Yes, I could do business advising and business consulting, but we've been taught to compartmentalize our personal and professional lives, which fragments us. And what we do is like, let's integrate it. And so watching my clients, create the life that they're excited to wake up to has been amazing. That makes me feel good because I lived in the prison of my own mind for so long. Yes, I was successful. I had all the things. I looked great on paper, but I was exhausted. I felt something was missing inside of myself. My relationships were struggling. So when I learned, like, okay, I'm the problem. I need to make changes. And I understood, like, okay, now I know what limiting beliefs are. And I started to change my stories and I started to feel joy. I'm like, I want everyone to feel this way.
I love that. And I agree with you 100% because it's all self-doubt. It's all, oh my gosh, what have I gotten into? The world is going to come to an end. And
Right.
I'm just stuck in this rat race and I can't move forward. I'm just running in a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said really kind of triggers my next question is let's talk a little bit about how that worked out with you to where you got to the point where you made the realization and then you shift and say, well, wait a minute. If I can understand this about myself and I can make these changes myself, I think I can help others and then, turn it into a successful business. So let's go back in the time machine a little bit to, your early days when you start having these problems with limiting beliefs and maybe, get overwhelmed or stressed out or, whatever the feelings were that you had. Tell me a little bit about your beginnings and how you got to that point.
To the point of being like overwhelmed.
Yeah, overwhelmed. And then we'll talk about the moment of clarity and breakthrough when you realized, oh, like you just said, I am the problem. What's it take leading up to figuring out that you are the problem?
You're exhausted and, your back's hurting. You have headaches all of the time. You can't catch your breath. You're just, like you said, constantly overwhelmed, spread thin. Then you have fun on the weekends because you go out and drink martinis and that's fun, and that makes you feel good for a minute, and then you're back to the overwhelm. And what I realized was it was my perfectionism. I didn't have a strong sense of self or self-worth, which I didn't know, and I didn't have a connection to myself and to a God of my understanding. And I was, listening to, and I love Grant Cardone and Tony Robbins and all of those 10Xers. As a woman, I was listening to all of, these like, let's go and get it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I didn't realize that I was tying my worth to my achievement, which meant I was going to constantly be chasing the dragon, and I was never going to be fulfilled or satisfied.
I get that. Boy, do I get that. That's awesome. So you come to this realization and you say, all right, I need to do something different because like you said, how's that working for you? It's not working very well. I'm not happy. I'm sad. I look forward to the weekends because it's temporary. And then I wake up the next morning and everything's still kind of a jumbled up mess. So when you have that moment of truth with yourself and you say, okay, Grace, you are not enjoying this. It's driving you crazy. You're stressed out. You're not looking forward to, helping people or doing whatever it is. What's the conversation that you have with yourself? And then we'll talk a little bit about how you were able to break out of that. But what's that conversation like with yourself? Did you have a breakdown moment where it's like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore? Or was it just a little something more subtle where you just were like, maybe I do need to try something different. And it just kind of touched you in a different way.
I believe I did have a breakdown moment. I probably have had a few breakdown moments. I still have some breakdown moments here and there.
We all do.
I remember it was in 2014 and I'm working with one of my coaches, and he would tell me, he goes, oh my God, you're such drama. It's like, because I would come to the call and I said, oh my God, I have to do this and that and the family and the kids. He's like, stop. He's like, you are going to die. So what you need to do is you need to delegate. And I did have a team at that time. However, I needed to start to learn to delegate in my personal life, which that was the first step, was realizing that if I delegated in my personal life, it didn't make me a bad wife or mother. That was the first step. The second step was I ended up meeting this incredible coach. She was a spiritual coach. And she had me at hello. And I'm like, oh, I love this lady. And so then I hired her as well. Working with her, I realized that I had to stop. I didn't realize I was a people pleaser, that I was codependent, and I wasn't setting boundaries. And so that's when the inner work started. So once I started doing the inner work combined with the professional work, so once I focused on my personal life, my professional life started to get better. You see? So I had them split. I didn't realize my personal life was affecting my business. And so that's when I started working on really loving myself.
Yep. That's awesome. And I think that that's such a common thing where we don't realize that, like I was running 100 miles an hour and we're building a successful business and everybody's looking at you saying, oh, you're doing a great job, but you feel empty on the inside. And it's like, man, I just don't understand why I don't feel so great about it like everybody around me does. And when you sit down with yourself and you have that moment, or someone says, your drama, and then you start to realize it and you start to, have that inside look at yourself and realize, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't have to do everything. Maybe I don't have to be present for every single thing. I love what you said earlier about, delegating in your personal life doesn't make you a bad mom or a bad wife or a bad friend. And I think that the hardest part for most people is coming to that understanding and then accepting it and actually taking action to change it. Would you agree with me on that?
Absolutely. And we have to really get to those beliefs, because 95% of the way we live our life is based on the unconscious, beliefs that we have. And so I had to go back and really unwind that. So the story I was telling myself, if I delegate in my personal life, that made me lazy. That made me not a good mother or a good wife. That was really what I believed. But that was imprinted on me from, childhood. So I had to really understand that, no, I'm a good person no matter what. I know that if I delegate if I buy the cookies for my kids' classroom instead of making them, that doesn't make me, a bad person. So I had to do a lot of unlearning and then create new stories that were more empowering, because I was sabotaging myself with people pleasing and the stories I had been telling myself.
Boy, I understand that completely. I feel like that was a major portion of my life as well. And I had a breakthrough moment, and, sadly enough, it was from my mom. She was on her deathbed and she was literally on her final days, and she was still worried about all these insignificant things. Yeah. And I swore in that moment, I was like, you know what? I love my mom to death. She taught me the most valuable lesson as one of the last things that she taught me in this world. And at that moment, I realized it's not that important. And I can come up with other things that make me happy, and I can do things. And if I decide, I'll tell you a secret. I went and played golf today with my business partner.
Right on.
We're not lazy. We work really hard. We do a great job. And I don't think either one of us felt a bit of shame or sorrow or guilt. But 4 or 5 years ago, I would have never been able to do something like that, because I would have felt like, oh my gosh, everything's going to fall apart if I'm gone for 3 hours. And, you don't have the confidence in the people that you put around you, even though you put great people in those positions. And I think that really stunted my growth as a person and as a business, because I wasn't willing to really accept it 100%. And then once I did accept it and I said, you know what, I need to take action. I need to change and be a different person. I need to have boundaries. I need to have, non-negotiables that I will not accept anything other than, boy, life starts to change for you. So you get into this situation where you've got people that are helping you along the way. And I've been very blessed. I've had some of the greatest people in the world. I have such an amazing network of friends and people all over the world that help me, but you still have to do the work yourself. And there are always moments of self-doubt as you're continuing this transformation in life. So let's talk a little bit about how that works for you. You realize, okay, I need to change. I'm not happy. You understand what needs to happen. You've got people around you that are helping you to formulate this strategy, but now it's time to take action and actually change. What was that like for you? Because that's the hardest part, I
Yeah.
think.
It's hard because one of the things I realized was I took a lot personal, and I would internalize, if I lost a client or if a friend didn't call me back. And one of the first things I learned in my transformation, actually, I had my transformation when I went back to school to get coach certified to open the coaching side of the business. That's when my real transformation happened. Yes, I had been successful. Yes, I was, had a good mindset, but that real deep transformation didn't happen until I went back to get coach certified, because in those classes we were working with each other, my classmates and I. And I realized that, number one, I had perfectionism is self-sabotage, period.
Always.
And I took everything personal, which meant I made it about me. Whenever there was something didn't work out, I internalized it and made it about me. And so that was the first place I started, was it's not about me. If I'm getting triggered, I learned to take a deep breath and pause, then step back and get curious. That was a game changer for me. I stopped taking things personal. And even to this day, people are like, how did you not take that personal? She just totally disrespected you. I said, I don't care, because I'm a child of the Most High God. I know who I am. And I get curious. I'm like, she's probably going through something, has nothing to do with me.
What an awesome perspective to have. And it takes so much work to be able to get to that point. And I'm so proud of myself because I feel like I've gotten to that point as well, where I used to care so much about what everybody else thought. And I had to be there to help everybody. And I had to be the most dependable person for everyone. And the reality of the matter is, when I turned around and needed someone to be there for me, none of those people were there. And it was crushing. And I realized, oh my, you have been the go-to for everybody, but they didn't really care that much, because when you really needed someone, they weren't there. And it helped to, I guess help is the word, to desensitize myself a little bit from some of the relationships that I had, to where now you look at it completely different. And you say, all right, we're here to help each other. Sure, I'll be your friend. I'll be a great person, but I need reciprocation, or I need to understand that this isn't just a one-way street. And once you get to that point in your life, it's like, this is kind of cool. You start getting more and more great people coming into your life. And I've had so many that have just fallen into place, and it's like, wow, if I hadn't taken these steps, I would have never been around these people, because I was a completely different person at that point. So let's talk. Yeah, right. And that's, I think we all go through that transformation. So let's talk a little bit about it. Let's say right now, I'm in desperate need, Grace. I need some help. I don't know what I'm doing with myself, even though I kind of do now. I'm just kind of role playing with you here.
Yeah, let's do it.
You're my coach, right? And you've gone through this process in life to where you've transformed yourself. And now you realize, hey, I want to help other people. So tell me a little bit about when you first get into this. And this is one of my favorite things to ask people. I've had so many people from different types of professions that go into this, and it's always the same question, but the answers are always amazing. So you get into this and you start coaching people and you start finding clients. And obviously that's probably a little bit of a gradual process. You don't just get a whole book of clients right off the bat. But tell me a little bit about that first experience you had with a new client, someone that you were working with, where all of a sudden it just hit you like a ton of bricks. That person just got it, and you saw a complete transformation based on your assistance and your help with them. Tell me a little bit about that feeling, because I know that is so awesome.
It really is. I can see the difference from when they walk. I do see some people in person, and I love that. I can see the difference from the first day they walk in, where they're like tight and their jaw is tight, and they're just, you could tell like they're stressed. Then as we start going through the process and they start coming back, I see them, they're more relaxed. You could just see the difference in their face and body. And that to me is the biggest reward, because most of us are working from survival. Like most of us are so stressed that we stay in a fight or flight response. So one of the first things I do, and I don't think my clients even realize this, is I make an effort to move them from the fight or flight response to more of a relaxed place, over the weeks that we work together initially. And so once I see them go from that like tight body, their shoulders up, once they walk in and I see them relaxed, that is the best feeling in the world, because I know what it feels to live in that fight or flight response. And we don't even realize it.
I know we don't, until something hits you and you're like, wow, I've been like that for a long time. And someone comes into your life and shows you that there's a different way. And you're that person for a lot of different people. And I think there's a lot of responsibility to that. But I also think it's probably one of the most joyful things that you could do in life is knowing I made a difference with multiple people. I helped these people who were struggling, and who knows what would have happened had they not, met you or come to your coaching, had your assistance with life in general. A lot of these guys and ladies may not have made it at all. They may have just completely imploded, and that would have been the end. So you literally are saving lives when you really put that into perspective. And to me, I think that's the coolest thing about coaching. I think that's the part that every one of us really loves, is when you see that you've made a difference for someone and you can understand, hey, you know what? That person's going to take a nugget from what I taught them, and they're going to teach it to someone else. And all of a sudden, your teachings are reaching who knows how many people, hundreds, thousands, millions at some point, And I think that that's the most awesome part about doing it. I'm sure that that's probably your favorite part as well. I can tell by just the expression on your face right now.
I never thought about it that way. You're right. Like we are each, I always say we're each the mustard seed. And I coach a lot of entrepreneurs, and they're like, Grace, like I'm doing this, social media, I'm not getting any traction, or I'm making these calls, I'm not getting any traction. I said, don't worry about it, because put the information out there, because you never know who's listening, who's watching. You're planting a seed and you don't even know it. And I feel so blessed and so grateful that, even in my staffing business, like we connect with so many people on a daily basis. I mean, thousands of people over 26 years. You never know what your words, even if you don't have a business, just as a human out in the world, you never know what that smile, what that kind word did for the person. And so check yourself as well. Anyone watching, I'm sure that we've planted so many seeds that have helped others without even realizing it.
Yeah. And I think that's so awesome. And there's nothing that I enjoy better. Like I said, I'm a simple person. I have a roofing business. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to be operating on brains or flying to the moon or anything. But one of the coolest things is when I get a random phone call or a text from someone, maybe a younger person, or even someone that I would consider a peer, and they ask me a question, or they say, hey, you know what? I saw your post that you got up and went to the gym this morning, and it motivated me to get up and go to the gym. And I just wanted to thank you. And it's crazy because you don't think of roofing as a community per se. You probably just think, it's a bunch of guys that go out and nail roofs onto houses. But we have some of the most amazing people in my industry. People that have, that have suffered from the lowest of the lows, addiction, jail, financial ruins, businesses falling apart, infidelity, you name it. And then you see these people transform into actual leaders of a major community like we have. And you can't help but just say, wow, you know what? That's someone that I admire. That's someone that I can completely appreciate. And I try to learn from as many people as I can. Because like you said, it doesn't take much. The guy at the gas station earlier is like, man, I appreciate your energy. I was having a bad day and I feel good. And it's like, I feel good now too. Even though I felt good going in, now I feel a little bit better. And that impact that you have on people, sometimes it never comes back to you. But when it does, you get some of your clients that come back and say, Grace, I broke through. I'm on to the next level now. I want to thank you for it. That's got to be the most amazing thing. And I'm sure that when you started this, that probably wasn't your main purpose, but as you continue to grow with it, you realize that's what this is really all about, right?
It really is what it's all about. And so as a young girl, I'm getting emotional.
That's what Keepin It Rio is all about.
Right. And I keep it real. when I was a young girl, my goal for life is I just wanted to help one person. And it's been just an incredible gift from God to have been able to and continue to, you know, help people. Like my business coaches, we talk about the bottom line, of course, like I'm in business. And I tell them, look, 90% of what I do every day is free. I'll let the 10% cover me. And they're like, well, you have to get better with your time. And I said, don't worry. This is how I like to serve. And because I'm serving and I'm being a good servant leader, the bottom line will come.
That's
So
how it
I've
works.
always been about service. Of course, I love money because money to me equates freedom, and money to me means I can help, my kids, my family, my whoever needs help. I love having money to be of service, because when we have money, we could create more impact, right? We can give back more to the community, and so for me, really, it's just service, and I think initially, being a people pleaser and having a hard time setting boundaries, like I always wanted to give, but part of me having my own transformation was learn to give to myself, because I couldn't give from an empty cup anymore.
Yep. I totally understand that as well. I've been there, and I've actually had people tell me that you can't pour from an empty cup no matter how hard
Right.
you try. Once the
Right.
wells run dry, you're basically done, and you're just kind of coasting by, or just barely skating by in life. And
That's
I think
right.
that's a horrible place to be, but there's always the opportunity to improve yourself and to find ways to get to that next point. I do want to talk a little bit about your other business as well. I don't want to leave the staffing business off to the side, because I think this is a pretty cool thing as well. And I've had many people that have staffing agencies that have been guests on the show in the
Oh,
past.
very cool.
And I always ask this question when it comes to that. Like, what led you to one day deciding, hey, you know what? I'm going to find people and I'm going to place them in these opportunities. It's coming from a place of service. You're
Totally.
trying to find people for the right opportunities for themselves. And, not even indirectly, you're directly putting people in life-changing scenarios. How do
Yes.
you get started with something like that? At what point did you realize that? And what was it like deciding, this is something I'm going to do as a business? Because again, you can't just go outside and say, hey, everybody, I'm going to place y'all in the greatest jobs you could ever get.
Yeah.
And, millions of people don't flock to you immediately. So tell me a little bit about the early days there and some of the struggles you might have had to go through before you got that going. And then again, I'm going to ask you about, when you have those people that come back to you after the fact and thank you for putting them in a life-changing
Yeah.
opportunity.
I am so blessed, so blessed. I feel so grateful for the opportunity that I've had the last 26 years in, my staffing business, because I had the opportunity to work with incredible organizations, incredible people. And in the early years, I mean, I was grateful because I started during the .com, you know, era, which there was a plethora of opportunity. But it took a lot of hard work. Like, it's still hard work. You're basically pounding the pavement. You're making, 100 calls. I wouldn't leave the office on Friday until I made 100 phone calls. At that time it was the phone. But when I connected with someone and I found them the right position, because that's their livelihood. Like, that's how people live, like through their jobs and their careers. It became just addicting to me to make sure that whoever came to me, I found them, matched them with the right opportunity. And I think that's why we made it through 26 years, because I really took a vested interest in the people that I was working with. It was not a numbers game. I mean, they say it's a numbers game. You have to make 100 phone calls to get, one close. But for me, it wasn't a numbers game. It was about, I really wanted to help and make sure that I got the right fit for both the client and the candidate. And I think that's why we were successful, because I made it personal. I
That's
made it
exactly it.
personal.
Yep. I love that, because you're so right. In a lot of cases, people just get kind of filtered through, and it never feels like their best interest is really at heart. And I understand that, like there are so many ways now to find employment. There are so many websites you can go to, which are so impersonal. And you basically, I'd go call 5, 6 people. Hey, we're selling roofs. You want to come join my roofing company? And then when you meet them in person, you realize maybe this isn't the best opportunity for this person. I want to make sure that everybody that I bring into my organization can thrive and can be successful and can have the opportunity to change their lifestyle. And a great opportunity for me to do that was just a few years ago. I hired a guy for my company, and he came in, and just immediately I felt this energy. And he was a very humble guy, very quiet, very well respected, respectful, I should say, reserved personality. And we sat down and I said, okay, tell me a little bit about why you're here. Number one, because he came into my office and he said, well, I was looking for a job. I saw that your company had great reviews, and I was driving by and I just wanted to stop and see if you were looking for anybody. And I said, well, I'm not just looking for anybody, but I'm looking for somebody that I can help transform their life. And I said, sit down with me and let's talk. After about 30 minutes, I realized that it wasn't monetary in any way. It was about, I want my kids to be proud. I want to not be a laborer anymore. I want to transition into a different type of work to where I can, make my children proud. That was really the main focus.
Yes.
We never once talked about dollars or cents. We never talked about benefits. We never talked about anything other than that. And I said, you know what? I think you're a perfect fit because I want to help you get to where you're going. I want your children to be proud of you, even though I know they are. It's another one of those cases of self-doubt or, limiting beliefs where you don't think that you're as good as you could be and you feel a little bit of guilt or shame about it. So I brought this guy on. He's been with me for almost 4 years now and has just blossomed into a totally different person. And to me, that is the coolest thing that I've ever done in my entire career. I've helped a lot of people that have started their own businesses after they've worked with me. Those haven't even been nearly as fulfilling as this one guy because he just believed in me 100%. And I said, you know what? I believe in you. And I'm going to do whatever I can. And every time we would meet and we would work, I would say things like, how much would you charge for this job? He'd give me a number and I'd say, no, you know that you're worth more than that. Amen. And you could start to see the confidence start to build. And then I'll never forget the very first time when we were outside and I said, okay, you can go in there and you can close this deal, or do you want me to go with you? And I kind of made it seem like, if I go with you, it's not going to be as good. And he said, no, I can do it. Went in, he was in there for about 15 minutes. And I know that it was extremely uncomfortable just based on the personality, but he came out with a huge smile on his face, a signed deal. And it's been a complete transformation ever since that. And I love that because I think that sometimes you meet people and you do realize, hey, maybe you're not right for this, but maybe I can put you in a different position over here that I think you'd be good with. And I want to ask the same question I asked you about the coaching. Tell me a story about somebody that you've placed somewhere in your career with your staffing agency that has come back to you maybe months, years, decades after the fact and said, Grace, because of you, I have a completely different life than I ever thought possible. And I couldn't be more happy. And I cannot be so, more thankful for the fact that I got to meet you and that you cared that much about me. So I know you got at least one of those. You probably got hundreds, but tell me about one that stands out to you.
There, again, I feel so blessed. And I love when that happens because it reminds me that all the sacrifice was worth it. Because it's a lot. It has not been easy. I sit here in front of you and I'm positive, and I've weathered many, many storms over the last 26 years. And all that sacrifice is worth it when I have one of those moments. And I have had many. There was a gentleman, he came to my office and he says, I want to make, $200,000. I said, okay. And I had to be transparent with him and said, you know what, if you want to make $200,000, you're not going to make it because with your attitude the way it is right now, you're not willing, to do what it takes. Like, you're not going to make $200,000. Like, you have to really get honest with yourself, and it's going to take commitment, consistency, and you're going to have to pound the pavement. And from what I've seen, that's not really what you've been doing, and you feel like it's going to come easy, and it's not. So you got to really think about, really have an honest talk with yourself. And then he left. That was it. I saw him, I don't know how many years later. By this time, he was very successful. I think he was in either the real estate or the mortgage industry, something to do with real estate and mortgages. He said, it was that talk that day that you gave me that inspired me to do what I'm doing. He said, you gave me a good kick in the butt. And I didn't even think twice. After he left that day, I didn't think about it again. And I didn't realize that talk, and by this point he had a family, young kids. I didn't realize that talk motivated him to take the action that he needed to get off his ass.
Right. Sometimes you never realize it. And sometimes it's years after the fact when someone just comes up and randomly says, hey, you know what? Thank you. Because I needed that, because in that moment, I thought I was greater than I was, and nobody was willing to tell me the truth. And you were the only one that told me I needed a kick in the ass, and you gave it to me. And now here, all these years later, I'm so grateful. My life is so much better than I ever dreamt possible. And to me, that's just beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story. I appreciate that. And
thank you.
I know you got plenty more of those, still to come. You're still young. You've still got plenty of time to go. So let's talk a little bit about the future. We've talked a little bit about the past, how you got to where you are, some of the folks that you've helped along the way. Let's talk about the future. What do you see yourself doing, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? Ew. You're 26 in, and I'm 27 into the roofing, and I know I still got a good 25 to go. And you're way younger than I am, I'm sure. So
no, I'm not. We're probably the same age.
We're probably exactly the same age. Yeah. We're still young. So tell me a little bit about what your future looks like, what you've got as a vision moving forward to continue to fulfill yourself, to continue to help as many people as you possibly can or want to. And what does it look like? Is there a time down the road where you can envision yourself saying, well, I've had a great time, I've done this, and now I'm going to just ride off into the sunset? Or is this something you plan on doing forever?
So there's a few reasons I started the coaching business 10 years ago. Number one, I feel like it's just, ever since I've been, a young person, people come to me for advice. So I'm usually that coach. So it was a natural progression. I love coaching people in my business, in my personal life. So it was a natural progression. But not only was it a natural progression, also, I knew that I could do coaching until you put me in the ground. So most likely, I would say that I will be, working until I take my last breath, because I do enjoy working, and I love coaching because I get to help other people and be in space with them. And I think a lot of coaching is just holding space for people, allowing them to feel safe to express what's within their heart. So I will be doing this for a very long time. And what I see for the future is definitely attracting, speaking opportunities where I can, go out and speak. And really, for me, I think we're all messengers. You're a messenger. I'm a messenger. And the message is humanity and kindness and love. And it starts with us. Right. And so for me to create a better world, then I need to start with myself. And that's what we are. And so the next 5, 10, 15 years, I will be out there working with others to, spread the message that the work begins with us. We need to connect to ourselves and a power greater than us. And that is my why. And of course, my family. I want to have fun and be connected and just, spread the word, that to make this a better place for us, it needs to start with us.
Absolutely. That is so beautiful. And I appreciate that very much. I love to ask this very last question here This is always my favorite part of the show, not because we're wrapping up. You know, I've already been talking for almost an hour.
Has it been that long?
So quick. It's been awesome. The final question I always love to ask before we start to wind it down is, let's just say that somebody's watching this episode right now, or maybe they're watching it 3 years from now, and they see this and they say, you know what? I really like her. I like the way that she helps people. I like her presentation. I like her personality. I think she's going to tell me the truth, but isn't going to be overbearing or, you know, disrespectful about it. And I'd like to work with Grace. How do those folks find you, and how do they go about getting a hold of you and seeing if they'd be a good candidate to work with you in that space?
Well, you can find me at www.graceredman.com, and Redman is spelled Redman, and also just Grace Redman. Google. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You will definitely find me, and I will be here for quite some time to come.
That is awesome. Before we wind things up, Grace, I'd like to thank you so much for your time this evening. This has been great. I love doing the podcast because I meet people. We haven't even known each other an hour yet, and we've just had a 51-minute conversation. It's been so great, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to a roofer from San Antonio on his podcast.
I love it.
That is just one of the coolest things that ever happens for me. And now you're stuck with me. I'm going to follow you too. And we're going to be friends forever. So
yes, we are.
Be ready for that.
I can't wait.
Anything that you would like to impart upon our audience before we give recognition to the people that we need to give recognition to and wind this thing down?
You know what? If you have a dream in your heart and, you know, you've been thinking about creating a business or, you know, doing something out of the box, I want to give you permission to do it. Because if it's in your heart, it's because it's meant to happen. Just do it.
Just do it. That is a slogan that's made bazillions of dollars.
That's right.
But it's a very basic thing, and it is so true. There's not going to be, you know, you'll never get tomorrow or yesterday back, and tomorrow's never guaranteed. So I've done some crazy things in my life. I've relocated multiple times across country. One thing I didn't tell you about this roofing company, when we bought this, it was out of business, and I had never been to San Antonio before in my life.
Oh my
God. So I literally
no
decided one day to move here to resurrect a roofing company that was out of business without knowing a human being within probably 500 miles of where I was at. And
that's
a lot
amazing.
Of fun.
That's amazing.
I did that in North Carolina too. Before I did this, I went to Charlotte one time and just moved there, and I opened a company up with a guy, and I didn't even know the dude until we met at the front door.
Wow.
But it was because I felt like it was something that I would regret if I didn't do it. And that's one thing I've always been able to really put into perspective is do it, because if you don't do it, you're going to feel terrible later on. So I appreciate that perspective. And I love the way that you present this to the world. You're a great person, I can tell. And
thank you.
Like I said, one day I'm gonna give you a call and say, Grace, you know what?
You better.
You changed my life.
I'm gonna hit you up. I'm gonna hit you up, Chuck.
Absolutely. I know you have a podcast, so if you're ever looking for a guest, I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
I know a guy. But
you.
This has been so much fun. I appreciate you so much. I'm going to put this out to the world. I'm going to do the reels and all that good stuff. But one last thing I have to do before we bid each other adieu and say goodbye to our audience, Grace, I got to tell you a little bit about my sponsor. You want to know a little bit about roofer.com? I know you do. You've been clamoring for this the whole time, I could tell. But let me tell you a little bit about Roofer. I do a live commercial for every episode because it's just my funny thing that I love to do. But I say this about Roofer. It is a software program that basically can take your roofing company from any size. It can handle all the tasks that you need to be successful, which is kind of what we're talking about. And what we do is we get the initial contact with their customer. We run them through the entire process through our CRM. We do all of our proposals. We get all the roof measurements through aerial satellite technology. We put the jobs into production. We order our materials. We pay our bills. We send out our invoices. And then at the end of the day, we send thank you notes. And then we send reminders down the road for them to thank us, or to thank us. They always thank us because we do a great job, but to give us a call later on down the road so we can do their maintenance and things like that. And just to check in. And Roofer has been my sponsor now for 3 full years. I've been a loyal user for 7 years with them now. Super group of people. I love everybody at Roofer, and I thank them for making this possible, because they helped my roofing company out in ways that I could not even explain and I didn't even realize were possible. So thank you to Roofer. Thank you to everyone that watches Keepin' It Rio. I always joke and say millions and millions of people. It may take a million years before a million people watch it, but I can assure you that it's going to happen. I'm taking Joe Rogan down one day down the road, and I'm going to be the #1 podcast in the world. So until then, I thank everybody for their support along the way. And like I said, this is so much fun. I always enjoy meeting new people. And if nobody watches it, you and I just had a great conversation, and that means more to me than anything. So
me too,
it's 100% value, and there's zero negativity. So Grace, thank you. And thank everybody. Until next week on Thursday, we will see you guys again next week. And I end every episode with the corniest thing. Before I say that, I will ask you, Grace, stick around after I cut this final commercial for the sponsor, and we'll just finalize our conversation. But until next week, ladies and gentlemen, y'all know my corny tagline is so simple. Keep on keeping it Rio. We will see you guys next week. Have a wonderful rest of the evening, y'all.
We're Roofer. We know that managing a roofing business can be chaotic, so we created a single platform with all the tools you need to easily run your roofing business. Stop switching between multiple different softwares and experience streamlined operations from lead to payment in hours instead of days. Visit roofr.com to get started for free.